Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. And today I'm going to be taking apart the world's biggest mass-produced Rubik's Cube, the MoYu 21x21. Alright, so today we're going to be having a little bit of an adventure by opening up this brand new MoYu 21x21 and having a look at the mechanism inside. If you haven't already checked out my unboxing of this cube, definitely go check it out right now. If you've already seen it, then you should already know that this 21x21 isn't actually my cube for me to keep. Instead, thecubicle.com actually sent me over their cube temporarily for me to make a few videos on. So I figure, what better thing to do with the time I have left with it than to tear it into pieces? But seriously though, we're going to be extremely careful in this video because obviously this is not my cube for me to break, and I don't want to owe the cubicle $1,500. Now I do feel like I'm pretty well qualified to do this and to tell you all about the mechanism. While I'm not quite a cube designer, I have been taking apart and reassembling cubes for well over a decade now, most of my life. I was taking apart and reassembling this 7x7 in 3rd grade, before I even knew how to solve it. Out of the hundreds of cubes in my collection, I've taken apart and reassembled almost every single one, and I haven't broken a piece for many, many years now. So the question then becomes, how do you go about taking apart a Rubik's Cube as big as the 21x21? Well, to explain that, you'll first have to know a little bit about the structure of a big cube, which I'll define as any cube 4x4 or bigger. It's just a little bit easier to demonstrate on a 5x5. Now there's 3 types of pieces that never change on a big cube, whether it's a 5x5, a 6x6, or a 21x21. And those are basically the 3x3 pieces. So we have these very inner centers, there's 6 of them and they make up the core. We have these very inner edge pieces, there's 12 of them, and we have the 8 corner pieces. And no matter if it's an even layer cube like a 6x6, where those centers and edges are actually hidden underneath the puzzle, or even a 21x21, you're always going to have exactly 6 of those inner centers, 1 on each side, 12 of those inner edges right in the very middle, and of course 8 corners. And so if those pieces all stay the same, what actually changes as a big cube gets bigger is in the remaining 3 types of pieces. We have these sort of offset edges, which are called wings. We have these 4 center pieces, kind of in the shape of a plus, so they're called plus centers. And then we have these other 4 center pieces, which are called X centers, because they make an X. And so, if we take a look at a bigger cube, like a 7x7, we can see that the only differences from the 5x5 is that the wings have been split in 2, the plus centers have been split in 2, and the X centers have been split in 4. Of course, they're split in a way where the cube still remains functional, but that's the only structural change in the mechanism. The same is, of course, true for the 21x21. Now, our wings have been split into 9 different pieces, our plus centers have been split into 9 different pieces, and our X centers have been split into 81 different pieces. Now the important thing to note about all this is that the 3x3 pieces tend to be much bigger on the inside and tend to be anchored much deeper into the mechanism. And so that means if you want to take apart a big cube, usually the easiest way is to start with one of your wings or sometimes one of your X centers. The same is true for a 7x7. If you want to take it apart, just pull on the wings, just like this, and they'll pop out super easily. Now this has gotten a lot harder over the years because even these wings and X centers have grown a lot deeper into the mechanism over the years. It's not nearly as easy as the old V-Cube 7 where you could just pop out a couple edges. And so that's my biggest concern with taking apart the 21x21. In theory, I should just be able to find the very inner piece. I think it's this one right here. And then I could just grab these 9 wings and yank them out. Actually, on a bigger cube like this, it's usually easier to grab just a smaller number of wings, like 3 of them. And we are getting a lot of wiggling, which shows that they do want to come out, but I'm afraid that they're just anchored too deep into the puzzle, and it's not going to be possible. Another problem is that this puzzle is just so tight to clamp all these pieces together that if there were enough wiggle room to get one of those edge pieces out, that would be equivalent to being able to open up a gap in the puzzle like this big, which would be like, I don't know, 6 of these little tiny center pieces, and they just get all mixed up and all locked up, and yeah, it wouldn't work out. Now, like I mentioned earlier, another potential option for opening up a big cube is actually prying out some of these X centers. So it seems like if we very carefully open up a gap right here where the X centers start, as well as maybe right there, we might be able to grab onto this piece right here and sort of pull it out. Oh, yep. I got it. I wasn't actually fully expecting that to work, but yeah, it looks like this piece doesn't actually go that deep into the mechanism, so it's pretty easy to just open up a gap and just sort of slide it out. Well, okay, let's see if we can do any more like that. And again, this is where I'm being extremely careful and never pulling on anything that doesn't feel like it's going to come out. This plastic is stronger than you think it is, but it still can break pretty easily. And there we have piece number 2. That one was actually even easier. Let's go for the next one. And here's piece number 3. It looks like they're all just coming out in easy succession now. So let's keep on going. I now find myself in a little game of teeth pulling simulator. Have a look at all these little tiny pieces all sorts of little shapes and sizes that have come out from these first 2 rows here. Luckily, it looks like I have entirely kept the 3rd row intact, so what I'm going to do is sort of organize these real quick so I don't mix them up with the rows to come. Okay, I've got those pieces all nice and organized back there. Now I think I'm going to keep going with maybe the next couple of rows. Okay, I'm pausing because I reached a centerpiece that just does not want to come out. I know I could just kind of yank on it and it would probably work, but I'm not taking any risks. Actually, there's something special about this piece that's not coming out. It's at the very center of this group of 81 pieces that makes up this one big X center. So it's probably held in especially deeply down there. It's actually pretty cool. You can see this sort of spherical design right there. But then if you look a little bit deeper past that first sphere, there's also a second sphere down there, and a third sphere, and I think also a fourth one. So this one is being anchored down underneath a new level of sphereness, so that makes it a lot harder to get out. As a comparison, the way that V-Cube originally designed all of their big cubes up to an 11x11 was with just one sphere. So that's why their cubes were so unstable, they popped so much, and that's the big advancement with big cubes over the years, just way more layers. So what I'm gonna do now is take advantage of the fact that the pieces further away from the corner, so these ones kind of right here, tend to be a lot smaller and held in less deeply into the cube. Those tend to be like these pieces over here, whereas the ones closer to the corner tend to be a lot bigger, a lot deeper, a lot harder to get out. So what I'm going to do is actually move over to this row of pieces right here. They should just be the mirror images of the pieces that I've dealt with already, and then I'll keep on moving this way until hopefully I've removed every single one, and it should be a lot easier to get these ones out. Oh yeah, and this is the advantage of already having the cube partially disassembled. It's very easy to get very many pieces out all at the same time. That was the first 2 rows there. Okay, so I got a little bit stuck on the last 4 pieces. It looks like we've jumped all the way down to the final sphere down there, so these 4 are just totally locked underneath it. What I've also done is organize these a little bit better in a way that makes more sense in my head. If you look at any big cube, you'll notice that the diagonal of pieces going down through that X center are all especially big and especially symmetrical, and so that's what these central pieces are right here. And then on either side of those diagonal pieces, I just have all of the other pieces at that particular depth stacked up. So for example, for this first diagonal piece, we have these 2 rows of pieces. For the next diagonal piece, we have these 2 rows, etc., going all the way down. Now on a smaller big cube like a 9x9, if you've worked inside of it enough, you'll be able to recognize all 9 of these X center pieces plus some symmetry just by looking at the piece. You'll instantly know where it goes relative to all the other ones. I bet even on an 11x11, it would still be possible to memorize all the different pieces, but on something as big as a 21x21 with 81 different X centers plus some symmetry, it's basically impossible to look at one individual piece and get anything more than a vague idea of where it might fit. If I were to jumble all these pieces up, I could probably sort them back out again, but it would probably take me like an hour. And that's just for 1/4 of the white center. So it's for that reason that I don't exactly plan to take the entire 21x21 apart. Once I've seen one of every piece, then I think I'll be good. But the video is far from over because we still haven't even touched a piece other than an X center. So let's move on to perhaps the most fun type of piece to take out, the wings. And as you can see, these pieces are absolutely massive. This is why they were not coming out when I was trying to pull them out through this gap earlier. It looks like they're coming out super easily. And it looks like this is where things get a little bit trickier. This is where these stuck X centers were. So let's see if getting an edge out is a little bit easier than those centers. And yep, that wasn't too bad. This edge is a lot more rigid, so it's a lot easier to confidently pull up on it as opposed to those little tiny centers. But now that we got those out, it should be super easy to get the centers out as well. Yep, there we go. And wow, take a look at that. That is a lot more bumpy than I was expecting. Lots of little random holes in there that aren't really necessary for the mechanism. I guess they're just sort of like friction ridges for things to slide around a little bit easier. You can see, especially right there on the wings, it's just like they took away most of the plastic and then added back just one little bump every once in a while so things would still slide along. Actually, I wonder if that has more to do with the turning or if it's a weight savings measure, because this cube is really heavy, 7 pounds. I wonder if they did this just to reduce the weight. I'm sure it would help. Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's where not being a cube designer doesn't really help me much, but let's go ahead and stack all these on top of each other in the right order and see what they look like. All right, look at that. Look at how they slide back and forth against each other just like that. That is incredible. You can also sort of see here the different levels of the spheres. So there's the first one right there, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. This is why the last couple pieces were really hard to take out because they're just anchored really deep under there. And just a fun fact, One set of these wings, of which there are 24 on the entire cube, weighs about half as much as a normal 3x3. So yeah, I would bet this is actually a weight savings measure. Anyway, if we go ahead and also remove the white and red wings, look at this. Oh, that's satisfying. That'll give us better access to have a look at this corner. I don't think we'll actually be able to remove it, but we should at least be able to have a look at how massive this stock is. Look at that. That is one big corner piece. Yeah, it looks like there's yet one more spherical layer down there that only the edges and the corners are anchored down into. I bet if you were to take all the pieces off the cube, except the edges and the corners, it would still kind of act like a functional 3x3, just because these would still be anchored down so well. So for that reason, I don't think we're going to be taking out any of these main edges or the corners, or obviously the centerpieces, but I do believe we still have one type of piece to explore. And those are the plus centers. Again, also very distinctive if you've ever taken apart a big cube, because they have these massive wings sticking out on either side, which make up these spherical shells. Let's go ahead and get more of them out here. So there's the next two. Here's the next few. Yeah, very easy to get out once we've removed most of the centers. There we go. So here is one very pokey set of plus centers on the 21x21. That looks very cool with all those spherical shells there. And I think that's the last thing we needed to explore. I guess taking those out gives us a different angle at these X centers right here. You can see all the different gaps where all those pokey shells of the plus centers fit in there. And you can also see this cool sort of locking mechanism. It's like every single layer sort of locks underneath the next one. That is pretty cool. Oh yeah, that also gives you a better view of this massive edge piece, which sits right up against the plus centers on this face right here, and of course the wings right here. And you can also see the very central centerpiece. This is where the screw is, right underneath that cap, holding together all those different spherical shells. That's so cool. So yeah, I seriously hope you've all enjoyed this little exploration of the inside of a 21x21. I know it may not be as dramatic as you hoped with a giant explosion, but I hope you learned something about big cubes that you didn't expect to learn, or at least got to see some pretty patterns. Anyway, for me, I am only halfway finished because I still have to put this cube all the way back together. So let's start the time lapse.